What has happened to the White Spiritual Boy Trust? It's been 2 months since businessman and politician Toke Sehwale confirmed the existence of the Heritage Fund. Sehwale had alleged that billions of rands were donated by the fund to the South African Reserve Bank for public spending on education and COVID-19 relief. Naledi Mashishi, researcher at Africa Check, who has been researching the trust, joins us now to give us more details. Naledi, good evening and thank you very much for your time. Of course, it was a startling announcement for many because we didn't have enough information on this trust. You went on a fact-finding mission. What did you find? First and foremost, I suppose the people are saying, does the fund exist, right? The leader of the African National Congress, or at least veteran of the African National Congress, says, no, look at the accounts are there. Go follow it up.
Well, that really is the golden question. Does the fund exist? I kind of went down on a fact-finding mission that turned up a lot more questions than it did answers. So let me just get into how I got into this. I wasn't actually looking for the White Spiritual Boy Trust. How I got into this was I was doing a Facebook check on a post that claimed that Ramaphosa had been, someone had filed charges against Ramaphosa for treason, assault, murder, among other charges. So I was just trying to see if someone had actually filed these charges. And then when I started to look into the affidavit, that's when things started to get weird. So according to the affidavit, which is 200 pages long, this White Spiritual Boy Trust goes back to the 1960s, and it appears to be some sort of global conspiracy. The affidavits detail over 600 bank accounts all across the world with outrageous sums of money. So there are some, for example, a net bank account in South Africa, which supposedly has $900 billion in it. And there's even a Mongolian account which has, I'm not even sure I can pronounce this number, something like 700 trillion US, which is a number that has 93 zeros. Now, just for context, right, the number that Ramaphosa is being accused of stealing is $41 quadrillion. But when you do a Google search, you'll find that this is actually more money than what exists in the world. If you had to combine the GDP of every single country on planet Earth, you would only get about 83 trillion US dollars. So if you convert 41 quadrillion rand into dollars, that's about that's just over $2 quadrillion. Yeah. That is more money than on planet Earth. And in fact, some of this money is supposedly made up of 100,000 tons of gold. Yeah. This is roughly a little more than half of all the gold that has ever been mined.
So, sorry, Naledi, hold on, go slowly for me. You're saying the claim in the affidavit says that President Ramaphosa is involved in the stealing of 41 quadrillion rands.
Yes, that's what the affidavit says.
Okay.
And it means that this 41 quadrillion rand was basically deposited into South Africa stemming back from the 60s. So if you go into the affidavit, you'll see that it'll claim, for example, that trillions of rands were stashed in Investec in 1974. But in fact, Investec didn't even have a banking license at that time. Well, it'll claim that billions were stashed into Westbank. But in fact, Westbank doesn't offer normal banking services. They're an asset-based financial provider. They basically give you money to finance cars, loans, businesses, that sort of thing. You can't open an account with them and do normal business transactions. So it gets very, the longer you look at this, the more confusing it actually gets.
Now, is there anything that is remotely trackable and checkable in the 200-page affidavit?
So one thing that people kind of keep referring to is they keep saying that, journalists need to look at the bank numbers because there are bank numbers. But even if you look at the bank numbers, you'll see that some of them were duplicated. And in fact, John LaRue did an excellent thread on Twitter where he went into the finer details of just how many of the bank statements look incorrect. So some of the bank numbers will be duplicated. So a bank number for Absa Bank, for example, is exactly the same as a bank number for FNB. Some of the bank statements have weird basic misspellings. For example, a bank statement that claims to be from Standard Bank misspells statement as statement. That's not really something that an official bank statement would do. So what I decided to do is I decided to just Google, White Spiritual Boy Trust, because I thought if some shadowy family supposedly has more money than exists on planet Earth. Surely there's some kind of paper trail somewhere about this. But what I found is that dating back to blogs from as early as like the early 2000s, the early 2010s, you started to see mentions of white spiritual boy trust on like blog posts on 4chan. There was one blog post which claimed that there's a shadowy underground of like a secret banking system controlled by the elites. There was another post that appeared on 4chan, which is the same site that, of course, birthed the QAnon conspiracy theory. So this has been in the works in conspiracy theory sites for a very long time.
And now you're saying that, of course, as you're going into this, they managed to supposedly say in this affidavit, some history pages provide the details that we need to follow that are buried somewhere, and that's where we can find the financial documents to support this claim of such a fund. Do any of those historical documents exist?
Well, that's the thing. They're kind of just saying, here's the number, go look for it. But also what they do with this affidavit that I realized very early on is the affidavit kind of drowns you in information. So it was actually very difficult for me to fact check this because there was so much information. And a lot of this information is actually completely irrelevant. For example, towards the beginning of the affidavits, they'll have the history of treason, which is completely irrelevant to this case. But also the point of documents like that is to just confuse you with the amount of information. But like I said, when you start to look at individual pieces of information, you start to see things that don't make sense. You start to see Investec accounts at a time when Investec didn't have a banking license. You start to see sums of money that simply don't exist. So, it's one of those things where you really, I describe it in my pieces like as being like a Renaissance painting. The longer you look at this, the stranger it gets.
So do we know the origins of this conspiracy theory? Who are the originators of this conspiracy theory? You're saying it's promoted by QAnon. Are they originators of it? Where does it come from?
So just to clarify, it's not promoted by QAnon. It's been on the same website that QAnon originates on, 4chan. So a lot of conspiracy theories originate on 4chan. QAnon is just the latest one. But it's very difficult to say, with this conspiracy theory, it's very difficult to say exactly where it comes from. I think that Jean Leroux in particular found that it actually dates back as far back as like the late 1990s. So it's difficult to say where exactly it comes from. But if you look at old 4chan pages from like early 2010s, you'll see a lot of the exact same statements that are in the affidavit on those pages. For example, I mentioned earlier the Standard Bank statement that says statement on it. That exact statement was on the QAnon page. And that QAnon page wasn't speaking about a conspiracy theory in South Africa in particular. It was speaking about a global conspiracy theory where there were possibly U.S. actors involved. So this isn't even a uniquely South African conspiracy theory. It's just landed on our shores.
Now, normally Africa Check does these things and you do the fact-finding mission, and at the end of it you give a verdict on whether or not this does exist or this is true, it is a statement that was said, or it is a figure that is real. Now, this allegation was raised, and the Reserve Bank alleged that the fund is a scam. What is your verdict?
So, it's difficult to say, because the Hawks have come out and said they're investigating this. It's going to be difficult for me to say exactly that it's nonsense. But from where I'm standing from, it just doesn't seem plausible. It doesn't seem plausible that, this conspiracy theory would expect us to believe that there is a family that has more money than God, that's just decided to donate more money than exists on planet Earth to South Africa for no real reason. And the family apparently seems to not be particularly concerned that 41 quadrillion rand disappeared. And, gold had really disappeared on planet Earth, then surely that we would have seen some kind of shockwaves in our global financial system. We simply haven't. So from where we're sitting at Africa Check, it doesn't look plausible at all. It looks quite ridiculous. And it'll be very interesting to see what emerges from the Hawks investigation.
Naledi, I appreciate your time. Thank you very much for joining us tonight on In Focus Africa Check researcher Naledi Mashishi, having done the fact-finding mission to find out what had been, or rather, what is this thing called the White Spiritual Boy Trust, and what they discovered down that rabbit hole. We'll continue in a moment. That